Hey, everybody. Welcome to our another Sessionable Saturdays. I'm your host, founder Greg Avola. I'm super excited to have you on this afternoon or wherever that is in your own time zone. We appreciate you coming in. We've got a great lineup today. We're going to talk with Two Roads with Phil. And before we get into that, we want to talk a little bit about a cool thing we launched this week. In case you haven't seen it, it is our Untapped Virtual Festival. This is a new festival that we're launching. It's going to be on June 3rd, 13th, and 14th. It's going to be a virtual festival. It's a U.S. multi-state festival that if you're in a select states, you're going to have 11 beers delivered to your door, and you'll be able to enjoy them with a 2-day live stream event that we're going to be having. You can see all the beers that are available on our session at untapped.com/virtual festival. And you can also buy tickets as well. So check it out. It's available again until May 25th. It's when the deadline we have to order the beers so they can deliver to your door before the festival on the 13th and 14th. And once again, we're going to have a great guest of people being on that live stream to be able to talk about the beer tasting, fun and games, and a whole lot more. So check us out, untapped.com/virtual festival. And we appreciate you checking out our brand new virtual festival. In this day and age, that's kind of all we can do. So with that being said, I want to bring in our guest today, Phil from Two Roads. Phil, thanks for being part of the show. We're excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Greg. That's
awesome. Great. Yeah, Phil, obviously is with the brewmaster at Two Roads, and we're super excited about learning all about the cool things that Two Roads is doing, especially in this time of need, as well as some new stuff that's going on with their Area 2 brewery and some of the other offerings they have. Before we get started with all that fun stuff, the most important thing about our Sessionable Saturdays is having a beer. So, Phil, what are you drinking on your side? I'll go after you.
So what I have here is a Synopsis, and this is our red fruits version. So Synopsis is a brand that we do at Area 2. Area 2 is our kind of an offshoot. It's an experimental brewery that's just down the road, about 1,000 feet from Two Roads. And we opened up last March, just had our 1-year anniversary, and then COVID hit, and we've been shut down since, obviously. But the brands we're still selling through our curbside service and, in stores throughout Connecticut and the 13-state region that we distribute in. So Synopsis is a product that we have done multiple versions of with different fruits, and it's inspired by a traditional lambic beer, but in a much more affordable package and a much faster time frame. So we do traditional lambic style ales over at Area 2 that customarily take 18, 20, 24 months, sometimes longer. From start to finish, but Synopsis is about a 2-month process, and it's again inspired by fruited lambics. As you can see, it's got a deep red color. This
beautiful color
version. So it's a combination of red currants, raspberries, and cranberries, and in that order of dominance. And it is also done. It is fermented. It's kettle soured first of all. And then it's fermented with our house strain, or mixed culture strain to Area 2, which has a farmhouse strain and then 3 Brett strains in it. And then there's another longer term fermentation that's blended in. So it's beer that, like a traditional lambic, is heavily fruited. It's sour. It has complexity from other fermentations, and it has some wood character as well. But it's sold in a 16-ounce can.
Nice.
And this again is the red fruits version. We also have currently blueberry acai on the market. We've also done a prickly pear, black currant, and we have a guava version coming out soon as well. Blackberry. So the fruits are definitely in the forefront of these beers. And it's sort of a lambic-inspired beer, but it is by no means a direct substitute for a traditional lambic style. But anyway, cheers.
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of Two Roads. As people know, for me, I live in Connecticut, so very close to the brewery from that perspective. And I love Too Juicy, which is one of my favorite hazy IPAs that you guys make. I figured for Sessionable Saturdays, I go with your Little Juicy, which is a littler version of that double IPA, which is a great hazy IPA. I first had this at GABF this past year, so it's a great little beverage. So if you're out there right now, crack open your beer and make sure you check in your beer to Untappd. Make sure you tag the Untappd at Home venue. It's a great venue that you can basically show that you're being safe and healthy out there, especially with the COVID. And I'll pour it into the glass here and hopefully not mess it up like I usually do. And there we go. So raise your glass, everybody. Cheers. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Good. And enjoy your beverage. Awesome. Well, let me get right into it. And also, while we're talking here, folks, so you're listening out there, if you have questions for Phil or anything about Two Roads, make sure you use the comment section to ask your question. Our team will kind of look at it and make sure we can answer it. And then we'll ask Phil about it on the air. But let's just start with Two Roads as a whole. Obviously, there is a story there. I'd love to hear where the Two Roads name came from and how this kind of came together for the name of your brewery.
Well, the Two Roads name is derived from the Robert Frost poem. Took the road less traveled is the most famous line in that one, and it's been a kind of guiding philosophy for us since we opened. So we started to talk about opening this brewery in 2010. And when I say we, I'm referring to myself, my three other partners and founders. Two of the three have known for 20 plus years. We've been in the beer business. It's shocking to say it, but collectively about 90 years of it.
You're like 100 years old, it appears almost.
We're almost as old as this building. So we'd actually been talking about, we had actually had a business plan to produce a brewery, to build a brewery about 25 years ago, 1995, 96. And then we put that on the shelf, kind of, stayed in touch. And in 2010, we got serious about finally doing this brewery together. So I'm kind of the exception, but my three other partners have all been in the corporate world. So that was yet another angle to the Two Roads thing and taking the road less traveled, that they were finally, following their hearts a little more than the sort of traditional career path. So that was another reason for it. And yet another one is that my prior experience with Southampton Brewery had me going to other breweries producing our beers, or at least attempting to, often with frustrating results, because the are out there to contract produce are very large, older breweries, not, really designed to make one type of beer. And that is your kind of typical American lager beer. So we, from that experience, we surmised that there was a demand for craft type contract production in the Northeast that wasn't being fulfilled. So when we started Two Roads, we wanted to obviously produce our own brands, launch our own brands from scratch. But we also have seen plenty of lessons where people build a small brewery, outgrow it quickly, and have to essentially start all over again.
Right.
At space. So we wanted to build it once, build it big, so that we could grow into it. And the way to logically do that was to start with other people's production. So we started from the get-go to be a contract brewery for craft style beers, as well as, launching our own brands. And so that was yet another reason to, for Two Roads. One was us and one was,
right,
our contract partners production. So as it turns out, the demand was greater than we had even hoped. So, here we are 7.5 years later with 13 customers that we produce for, as well as our own brands. And we're about at parity right now. It's about 50-50. The production half is Two Roads, half is, our 13 other contracts combined. So it's worked out well. But again, that the whole mentality of taking the road less traveled, doing things somewhat differently, has been a philosophy that we've tried to sustain and will continue to, here with Two Roads.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously being a fan of you guys and been to your brewery a few times, I've always blown away by the size of the brewery that you guys created. Usually, like you said, when you first start out in this particular world, you usually a small brewery start with a smaller batch. When they get to be really big, they got to do it all over again. So you guys took a different approach, like you mentioned. It's really a great brewery. If you walk into the taste room where you're located right now, I remember there's a big glass wall. You can look out into the production facility and the huge facility you guys have there. So it's great to see that not only are you be able to helping yourself brew your own beer, but also other people that can, they don't have the size that you guys have, do that as well. And, speaking of my love for Two Roads, a lot of people in the comments now that are saying their love as well. So we have someone saying Two Roads, always a great spot on the Connecticut Beer Trail. It's a great situation as well. Rick Andrews said, love Stratford, Connecticut, and Two Roads as well. So, we didn't say it earlier, but, Two Roads is located in Stratford, Connecticut. And for people that are not familiar with Connecticut, it's on the shoreline, closer to the New York border, I would say, than the center of Connecticut or Hartford. But a lot of great stuff coming out of there, and a lot of fans you guys obviously have for the products you have built. And it's a testament to you guys being able to, again, follow those two roads and be able to kind of help yourself and help others as well with those contract facilities. Because there's not really another brewery of your size in the Northeast that does this type of thing. Is that right?
Not that I'm aware of. And there are other breweries that whose sole purpose is contract production that have
right.
For us, it's a few, but none quite as large. So
nice. Well, shifting a little gears a little bit to your shirt and your beer you talked about earlier. Talk to us about Area 2, because unfortunately I haven't had a chance to visit Area 2 yet. It wasn't, when I visited the brewery a few times, it wasn't built yet. Talk about why build another brewery and why not build it into your own facility and expand it. What was the idea around that?
Well, Area 2 is dedicated to producing what we call experimental beers. So it is, with that notion, people think experimental. It means different people, of course, but most people think of, sour beers that are aged in barrels.
Right.
And that is, in fact, a lot of what we do at Area 2, but it's actually something that we started doing from really the beginning. So when we opened in 2012, we were building out. We bought this factory in March of 2012 and immediately started renovations. Equipment started to arrive in July, and then we started test brewing at the end of October, opened the tasting room in December. So it was kind of pretty quick track to getting open. But even during that time, we were working with a couple local professors at Sacred Heart University who were enthusiastic homebrewers, but also yeast experts and career microbiologists, one of which who studied yeast his entire career, and working with them to isolate yeast from our property to do truly local. I mean, hyper local is right from our property, using yeast in hops as well, but we have been doing these experimental brews and barrel-aged sour beers really since we opened. We were just using an outbuilding on the property that could hold maybe 50 or 60 barrels. So not a lot of space, but the key thing was it had to be separate. It had to be away from the what we call now the clean brewery. So it had to, because you use a lot of wild yeast and bacteria that you do not want in your main facility. So
correct, yeah.
Having a separate building. And with Area 2, we had an adjacent lot that went up for sale, and we bought it, started to plan the construction out, and then broke ground in October of 2017. And it took a year and change to build that building, get everything ready, and we opened the doors in March of 19. Just had our first anniversary before COVID in earnest, and we had to shut down. So Area 2 has its own tasting room, and it's a completely different look and consumer experience. But there are some of the same overarching themes between the two facilities, but it's really it's got its own identity. And it's just 1,200 feet away.
That helps significantly when people want to try both and go to both areas. When I visited Two Roads a little while ago for the first time, I always loved the look and feel of your brewery. It's very unique. It's something that it's hard to describe. But I believe that the building, the main one that you're currently in, was it a school or something? Because I remember walking through feeling like it was educational school or something like that before it became a brewery. I'm always interested to see what buildings were before they came into a brewery.
No, it was a factory. So it was
really?
A factory called the U.S. Baird Corporation, and they made heavy machinery. Their motto was, "We make machines that make machines." Machines bent and formed metal. They sold a lot to the automotive industry worldwide. And in its heyday, this place employed 500 people around the clock. Up until the 1980s, when things started to slow down, manufacturing in the States in general, but they just couldn't keep up with foreign competition, and so didn't modernize, with the machining methods, and just eventually, faded away. And the building was vacant for about 8 years before we picked it up. And that was an integral part of our business plan, was that we wanted to repurpose an old factory building. So, this building, diamond in the rough for sure. It sat empty for years, and the term eyesore, I think, applied before we're here. There's a bit of an eyesore in town, and so once we announced plans to renovate the building, the town got 100% behind us, and has been ever since. So it's been a great relationship with the town of Stratford, and most importantly with the residents of Stratford, who many of which came out, never had craft beer before, but they were curious about this building that sat vacant, now has a brewery in it, and they're some of our most loyal customers. So it really, really has been a great relationship with Stratford.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's a great area. If you're ever in the area in the future, definitely recommend it. Obviously, when COVID lifts. A question we have in the chat here from Beers with Shim asks, how many beers have run through your cool ship so far? Do you have any idea on how many have gone through your cool ship up there?
I do, because it's only been 3 at this point. So cool ship is a feature. It's probably the most talked about part of Area 2. Mm-hmm. For those who are not familiar with what it is, it's a large, basically like a steel pan that is used. It's the old-fashioned way of cooling wort or unfermented beer down. Usually they're located in attics or somewhere where there's a good breeze and lots of surface area. And in our case, ours is in the back of our building, facing a wetlands preserve. Mm-hmm. And sort of what people associate with cool ships these days is spontaneous fermentation. So that's where you leave the windows open and put no yeast into the wort. You simply let airborne wild yeast that's both in the space and in the air, you let that get in there, and that is where your fermentation agents are. So it's truly wild. It's truly an expression of where it's located, of what is the flora around it. We're careful not to clean it too aggressively, because we're trying to get that room established with its own kind of microclimate. Just a bacterial climate that we're trying to get established in there. So that takes time, and the beers that come out are by definition unpredictable. But we're being studious about it. We're doing it certain times of year, and our professor friends at Sacred Heart have been very much involved in doing, basically taking the microbiological population of the space before we started, after the first batch, after the second, after the third, and they'll continue to track it over time. And, presumably we'll see a pattern develop with that. So cool ship is the thing that takes a while to get going. It's very cool, predictable. But, for better or worse, it is a true expression of the microclimate in our specific spot in the world.
Awesome. I think it's amazing that you guys have one of those because they're not readily, not all brewers have the space for the surface area and the things that you mentioned before. So it's very cool to see as part of your process there with Area 2. Let's shift gears for a second here and let's talk a little bit about your H2O Roads product, which is the hard seltzer you guys launched pretty recently, as I recall. Obviously a lot of brewers are now going toward the hard seltzer route. It's become very popular. What's your kind of opinion on that in terms of a lot of breweries jumping into that train? Is something that you guys have thought about before as an adaptation to consumer taste profile, what they like to have? What's the thought process around that brand for you guys?
Well, let's first for some background. I mean, hard seltzers have just sort of come out of nowhere. I mean, they're a phenomenon. They're a juggernaut. It's amazing the market share that they've acquired in just about 3 years. It's actually, that's old news. It's more than 6% of the U.S. beer market at this point.
Right.
But it basically captured 6% of the U.S. beer market in a 3-year period, where it took craft beer 20 some odd years, 20, 22 years, something like that to hit 6%. Mm-hmm. Hard seltzers are something I guess a lot of us thought would just come and go really quickly. And we at first ignored them, but there's denying the appeal for some people. It's about a light, refreshing product. It's about lower calories. It's all those things that are now classic in beer and really food and beverage world in general. But we thought long and hard about it. We originally decided no, we're not going to do it, and then we revisited that decision and decided to go forward. But we weren't going to do it unless we could do it with our own unique spin.
Right.
Ours was using real fruit juice. Mm-hmm. So, the classic hard seltzers out there are crystal clear. They're basically, alcohol, water, and a fruit flavoring. So there's nothing really natural about the flavor. It's entirely, manufactured with, I'm talking with the large volume versions. And so we decided, if we could do it with real fruit, and no extracts, no flavorings, just 100% real fruit, and do it well, then it was worth entering that market. It was a significant enough point of difference for us to go forward, and we did. We did a lot of trials, and I will say that it certainly is challenging to keep a product that has fermentable sugars in it, to keep it stable on the shelf.
Right.
Invested considerably in the equipment to do it successfully, and are going forward with that. We currently have 4 flavors that we've developed. We're working on more, but the hard seltzers are here to stay. Mm-hmm. Just like hazy IPAs are. I was predicting 4 years ago that hazy IPAs would be here for another 6, 12 months, maybe 18 months. They'd be gone, and how wrong I was.
Yeah, they're definitely not going anywhere. That's for sure. They're popping up all over the place. But yeah, I mean, interesting, from a perspective of hard seltzer, like you said, it popped out of nowhere and all of a sudden a lot of brewers are doing it. I think interesting your take on it. Well, like you said, your mentality for your brewery is taking the road less traveled, and you definitely did with the hard seltzer that uses the actual fruit in there, which is interesting. My wife is a huge sour fan, and she likes hard seltzer, and she tried it, and it was very unique and different for her than trying an additional hard seltzer because of the fact that you have that natural fruit flavoring to it that makes it a lot more, not just a clear. There's a color to it, and that's kind of interesting from taking that beverage perspective there. But talking a little bit about Two Roads and what you're doing for the community, there's a lot of things right now that's going on in your brewery, even today with your new program for the Beer to Go program. I want to talk a little bit about that and how that kind of helped your brewery and the community in this time of need.
Sure. So once the mandate was given that we had to close the tasting room, we immediately started working on a plan for curbside and how we could facilitate that, make it easier for people. most of all, make it safe. So what we came up with was a portal where people could shop online. They could pick and choose the beers in whatever quantities or types they want to purchase, and everything is done in advance to when they come down and pick up their order. So we receive the order, we pull it, we stage it, and then when the customer arrives here, they call us on the phone and we run it downstairs to them. Everyone here is wearing masks and gloves, and there's hand sanitizer everywhere. And we're very careful about it, and people are very grateful. They seem to really appreciate the convenience of it. It's a way to get out of the house, but not necessarily put themselves in any danger. So what most people do is they'll call us on the phone, they'll pop their trunk or their hatch, we'll put the beer in the back, close it, thank you very much, have a good day, and they drive off. And people have been really happy about it, and just appreciate getting out, but also make it a very safe transaction. And so it's been working well. The other thing that we're doing, I mentioned hand sanitizers everywhere because we're now making it and donating it to area medical facilities get priority, but also local fire department, EMTs, and police department. We've made donations to them, the library. So what we're doing, we received our distiller's license about a month and a half ago. And unfortunately, we have lots of keg beer that we can't sell because there's nowhere to sell it. So we've been distilling that into hand sanitizer.
Oh, wow.
We're following a recipe that the WHO posted on their website. Mm-hmm. Alcohol is alcohol. It's the main ingredient in hand sanitizer. So you want to be 65% or higher, and ours is at 75%. So it does the trick. It works. And, we're not interested in selling any. We're just simply interested in helping, the local people in need, people who do, adult remote care, mm-hmm. In-home care. We've donated to them. So, we keep making it, and we are, as of this Wednesday, we are going to open our outdoor spaces. So the governor here in Connecticut is going to permit restaurants or establishments with outdoor spaces to open up as of this coming Wednesday, the 20th. Mm-hmm. For those of you who have been down to Two Roads, if you're familiar with what we call the hop yard, it's the large area of lawn between Two Roads and Area 2. Mm-hmm. Will be open starting, just a few days, as well as our traditional beer garden at Two Roads. And again, we'll be observing the social distancing and we'll have hand sanitizer everywhere. And we'll be, have food trucks here and be selling our beer, both to go still. The curbside business is going to keep going strong, I'm sure of that. But there's also, I'm sure, a group of people who are have a pent up desire to get out, and socialize. And so we're going to, have the venue to do that safely in our hop yard as well as our beer garden. And then in subsequent weeks, we also have a fair amount of outdoor space over at Area 2. We have a rooftop beer garden, and a deck in the back of the facility by the cool ship, faces the wetlands. And that'll be open too in the coming weeks. But we want to just kind of do this in a phased way as is being recommended. And we're excited. We're looking forward to that because it's obviously a step in a positive direction.
Yeah, ultimately, I can speak for someone who's been cooped up for so long. We're all looking to get out there and go back and be able to give to our local breweries, and especially the good news about being able to do this safely outdoors is exciting for a lot of people in the areas across the country, not just in Connecticut. One of the cool things about the fans of Two Roads, and myself included, is the label artwork, and you can see some of the stuff on the back of my building, of my room here, where you have the tacker tins up there. But one of the questions we have in our channel asks, "Hey Phil, who designs your cool labels?" I personally want to know this too because I'm a huge fan of the brand out there. Is that something you can share with us?
Sure. We use a company called BR Zoom, and they've been friends of Two Roads since the beginning, of course. But Brad Hiddle, who's our CEO, has had a long relationship with one of the owners of BR Zoom and the founders. And curiously, they're actually located down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They did, up until a few years ago, have a studio in Wilton, Connecticut. So they're kind of between the two locations. But they do all of our graphic work, and there's super talented group of people, and they're just expert at producing graphics that stand out. And let's say craft beer is a very crowded field, and there's lots and lots of products on the shelf. So to stick out, you do need to have some unique designs that pop, and BR Zoom just executes that as good as anyone. Awesome.
Another question we have here, flipping back over to your distillery license that you got, comes from something cool. When this is all over, do you think you'll make use of the distillery license to make spirits, like a too juicy flavored vodka, maybe? Which does sound pretty interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe not that. We hadn't thought of that specific brand, but of course, we've been talking about it for a long time, and it was a pre-COVID discussion and decision for sure, and we absolutely will plan to do spirits. We'll plan to do canned cocktails, which are
nice.
Right behind hard seltzers in terms of a very fast growing segment in the beverage industry. And we're really excited about doing spirits, vodka, gin, bourbons, malt whiskeys. We have a lot of the infrastructure already in place to do all this. It's really, we need to have add a couple of key pieces of equipment to put it all together. So, and most breweries are kind of on the 10 or 15 yard line when they want to go forward and do a distillery. There's most of the stuff that's required is already in place. So it's not necessarily an easy transition, but it's related to beer making. Scotch, malt whiskeys start as beer, bourbon starts as beer. So there's definitely some overlap, and we're absolutely looking forward to the crossover between the business.
Right.
So, we will probably distill some Two Roads products, and then we'll take the barrels from our distillery and age beer in them, and vice versa. And then, Area 2 products will be in the mix as well, but we'll also do the classics.
Right.
Classic spirits as well, but definitely some things that play off of Two Roads and Area 2, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be very exciting. I know a lot of brewers are out there doing very similar things. Dogfish comes to mind with their spirits section that they've launched in the last couple of years. So, I think, people are a big fan of brands, and being able to kind of adapt that brand to multiple markets and products is obviously a huge beneficial thing that you guys see for sure. We're still getting a lot of questions in the chat. So if you still have any questions for Phil, please make sure to enter them in the chat there. We'll take another one here from Jeffrey B. He says, "Hi, Phil. I really liked the Geyser Goza and Typecast on the collaboration side. Any chance we see Typecast again, or perhaps a new variant of it?"
There's always a chance of that, yes. So for those who aren't familiar, Typecast was a collaboration we did with Lawson's Finest Liquid with Sean. And the name was derived of, I've come to be typecast as the farmhouse ale guy, and he typecast as an IPA guy. So we did a farmhouse IPA, tongue in cheek, and that was Typecast. So yes, Sean and I have kicked around the ideas of doing another collaboration, and I'm nearly positive that'll happen. We've both been a little busy opening our respective breweries. Myself, Area 2 going, and then Sean, his big brewery up Waitsville, Vermont, which is a fantastic facility if you're ever up that way. So I'm sure we'll do something again. And Geyser Goza is one that we did with Evil Twin. We have another collaboration with Twin that's coming out this October. That's called 13 Months of Sun, which is a beer that we brewed in Ethiopia. We both traveled to Ethiopia in November, and did the collaboration, did the pilot brew there. So it's a hazy IPA that's made with teff, which is teff is an indigenous grain and a staple in Ethiopia. It's a plant that hand harvested. It's just a low-growing plant, and the seed is very small. It's even smaller than a chia seed. And so we use some teff flour in the brew. And then, of course, Ethiopia's most famous export is coffee. So there's coffee in the IPA as well. There's just a hint of coffee in the finish. But it's a classic easy IPA. It's double dry hopped. It's heavily dry hopped. There's that finish of we use Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee as well as some Sidamo. So there's two blend. It's a blend of two varieties, Ethiopian grown, and that's coming out in October.
Awesome. You talked a little bit about with Typecast here. Last topic I wanted to discuss with you is more along. You said you're known as the farmhouse ale guy. You obviously authored a book about this. How did that come together, and what have you learned from that experience of writing that book? And for those that don't know, a little bit about what that book is.
Well, the book the research dates back to 2003, and the book came out in 2005. I was in discussions with Brewers Publications about doing something Belgian brewing. At the time, I was out in Southampton, New York, and that's a seasonal area, and we're in a brew pub there. So summer was very busy, but the rest of the year was slower. So to be honest, I was a little bored and looking for a side project. and that came to be. It was originally Brewers Publication wanted to do an all-encompassing book on Belgian brewing. So when I went to research, I took that tack, and then after I came back, they said, "Look, let's just narrow this down to farmhouse styles," and that worked for me. It made it less daunting, but it was still a big project, and it was fun. It was really educational, and at the time, most of what was reported on is what was happening in Belgium and northern France. Mm-hmm. But now, that's a book that is sadly in need of a revision or three. So much has happened, and most of what has happened here in the States. So one of these days, I have talked to Brewers Publications about doing a sequel, but a revision. And one of these days we'll get to it. But I should give a shout out to Lars, who is a Norwegian beer enthusiast who has really a very comprehensive blog on farmhouse brewing. And again, at the time I researched my book, farmhouse ales were just known to be formerly French Flanders, which now encompasses northern France and southwestern Belgium. And what Lars uncovered is that there's farmhouse brewing happening in remote parts of Norway and Scandinavia in general, but also in unlikely places like Georgia. Georgia, the country, not the state.
Yeah. And
Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, places like that aren't known for a strong brewing tradition, and perhaps unfairly so. But Lars's book is just come out by Brewers Publications, so it's really expanding the definition of what farmhouse brewing is. And there's some really interesting stuff that is coming out of that. But probably the biggest impact so far has been, and I have heard many different ways on how to pronounce this, but Norwegians tell me it's pronounced kvike. And this is their colloquial term for yeast. Mm-hmm. And these yeasts are now making their way into American craft brews. And in Norway, they were handed down from generations to generations, and they're remarkably clean and resilient yeasts that have become a favorite for experimental brewers to play around with. And we have a batch ready to go on tap as soon as we're allowed to reopen Area 2. And it's just that's kind of the main thing right now that's come out of it. But it just sort of making it known that there are pockets of extremely traditional brewing happening in rural areas that's was very surprising to me and fascinating. So look for Lars's book, Through Brewers Publication, and one of these days I will do a revision of House Sales, but I don't know when.
Well, Phil, we really appreciate you coming on the show today, talking all things about Two Roads and some of the stuff that you're doing. And just a programming note for those watching right now, next Saturday for our Sessionable Saturdays, we're going to be having Phil Bushy from Legion Brewing over in Charlotte talking about a little bit of his history and how he started a very similar process that Two Roads did with their own brewing facility there. And then next Thursday for our virtual happy hour, we're going to be talking to Dan McLaughlin, which is the owner of the Pony Bar up in New York City. Pony Bar is one of the founders' hangout spots, and was my introduction to craft beer when I lived in New York City many, many moons ago. So looking forward to that, and you can check all the details out on untapped.tv to find all the scheduling times and subscribe for updates there. And again, if you have any questions on the show or feedback for us, make sure you let us know at media@untapped.com. And before we sign off here, I want to let you, Phil, have any more notes where people can find you, maybe any URLs to the Beer to Go program or something you want to give to the community?
Again, we're going to continue to be supportive to the community for people who come and pick up beer curbside, for local hospitals, medical facilities. And we're also partnering. We have a program called Back on the Road. So we're partnering up with our distributors and retailers to, help absorb the cost of out of code beer, take that, replace it with fresh beer. We're discounting our customers because they're obviously falling on hard times like we all have. So we're doing our absolute best to support all our customers, whether they be, bars, restaurants, distributors, or most importantly, the individual consumer. So we're going to be here continuing to do our thing for the community to the best of our ability.
Awesome, Phil. We're super excited to have you on again. Thank you so much. And everybody watching out there, make sure you're checking in at Untapped at Home for being safe out there. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you all. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.